Hi everyone, very good afternoon, and I would like to begin by thanking Mr. Sinha for inviting me here. I think it's a great opportunity and really lovely to see all of you be present here to have these kind of talks. Before I begin, I would just to explain the title a little bit. The House of Haraf, meaning Haraf is a Bengali word which loosely translated just means movable types. And Sri Panchanan Karmakar, who is my grandfather, was a type master. He worked under the supervision of this gentleman and a very famous English Orientalist named Mr. Charles Wilkins. And he sort of did the impossible, which was to create the first Bangla movable type. The former British capital was, of course, Kolkata. And I'll take you through the chapters in history and more so what my family has managed to sort of hold on very dearly over the past 5 generations. I wouldn't call that an archival effort, but more so like a very enduring effort to sort of remember where it all began. For the past 5 generations now, we have been living in this small town called Srirampur, which is about 45 minutes from Howrah, which most of you might be familiar with. So I'll just quickly take you through where it all started. So my great grandfather, Panchanan Karmakar, came from a lineage of what would you now call a swordsmith, a blacksmith, sculptor from that lineage. Earlier, in India, a lot of occupation was caste based, and because we were Karmakars, that sort of by default became our occupation. Now, before Panchanan Karmakar and his brother Gadadhar Karmakar were discovered, they were found in the darbar of Nawab Alivardi Khan, who was then a Mughal ruler, obviously, and they used to work in his darbar where the rulers had swords from battles, and sometimes whoever was the sort of sword keeper, the empire, the ruler, or the soldier normally had their names engraved or their titles engraved on the sword, which was again a very intricate way of carving on metal, which is where their specialty sort of lied. And so when the Britishers started making a very strong foothold in Bengal, this whole belt, which is right next to the Hooghly River, was very trade rich, and a lot of these tradesmen and also the people from East India Company used to frequently visit this part of town, and that is where it's during that time when Lord Warren Hastings, who was the then governor of West Bengal, realized that for better administration it's imperative for them to learn the local language, which of course was Bangla. And the Gutenberg technology, which is a very painstaking technology to sort of make movable types. Like right now, very recently, I mean, I think a few of you or a lot of you might have been using artificial tools. I mean, we as a civilization have become so lazy. Like sometimes I use my phone because to send voice notes, and sometimes to give prompts on AI on voice note because I'm too lazy to type. And then sometimes I go back to these chapters in history and look back how painstaking and effort it was to put something from paper, like from metal to print. So this basically is a journey of that. So discovering the Karmakar brothers, and sorry, before I move on, I'll just tell you the connect between Karmakar and my surname is Malik. So basically, Panchanan Karmakar and his ancestors were sort of gifted what in Bengali is called this term upadhi, or like a title as a reward to the whole family, where Malik as a title was gifted to us, which my great grandfathers then did not use it formally, but now gradually over the generations we have adapted Mollik because it was a government gifted title to respect that, and which is why he was a Karmakar and I am a Malik. Now, moving back to how they were discovered. So, when Lord Warren Hastings gave this order that we must learn Bangla, there was this need that they need to learn the grammar or the basics of the Bengali language. They essentially wanted a translation of a grammar book from Bengali to English. Now, the Gutenberg technology, which was predominantly the hand mold technology of printing, was quite prevalent in different parts of Europe by then. So, they were very sort of confident that they will be able to create the Bangla movable type in Britain itself. But after multiple efforts, they failed, because if you look at the Bangla script versus, and when you compare it to the English script, Bangla or most Indian languages for that matter have very complicated artistic script, because it doesn't come with only alphabets. They also have supporting characters like matras and dots here and there, which to sort of carve on a metal tip this size was a very meticulous task at that point in time. So, despite several attempts that the British craftsmen sort of made, they failed miserably. That is when they realized that they will probably have to locally source the person to help them with this mammoth task. And after multiple courses of scouting, they came across the Karmakar brothers, who were quite renowned for their work on metal, which was quite interesting, because there were a lot of calligraphers, there were a lot of type makers, but not the ones who could sort of put it on metal. So, the Karmakar brothers were actually quite young in age when they were discovered, and the British administration was not quite sure if they will be able to pull off the job, but to their surprise, they were quite delighted when the first batch of the Bangla Haraf, the movable types, were produced in front of them. And this was only possible by the notable contribution and the thorough guidance that Sir Charles Wilkins provided Panchanan Karmakar, because he was a type master and he sort of helped them adapt an European technology and train them in ways where they could also make it possible in an Indian language. So, I think this is also one of the best examples that when art and invention sort of come together, when science and art come together, they coexist to bring something very meaningful and something that lasts generation. So, this is a little bit of a sneak peek into how this was all done. So, like you see, the punch here was actually called the mother type. It's basically this size. Tomorrow there is an exhibition, so if any of you are around, please feel free to join. I would love to just take you through a demonstration and give you actual dimension of how small and intricate this whole task was. So, the punch is formally a steel metal in most cases, on which the alphabet needed to be carved, not just carved, but also carved in reverse, because it is a print technology. So, it was reverse straight, reverse straight. So, the punch was first taken and then it was cut, and then the tip was used to sort of carve that alphabet in reverse along with the matras. So, they were sort of co-joined, and then what you see here is matrix is more of a flat based metal surface. It was slightly more softer metal than the punch. So, what they would do is, once the tip of the punch had the letter carving, they would hammer the tip of that on that matrix type and get the imprint. Now, that would be safely secured in mold, which is a mix of a metal and a wooden block, which together sort of comes, and then there is a small ladle that used to put mixed metal, sort of molten mixed metal inside that mold once it was secured to deliver movable types. Now, once the movable types were produced, they were sort of aligned very painstakingly on what we now would call something like a dashboard, one after the other, to put together a sentence. So, now if you put together this entire effort, it was very, very long, and which is why movable types were required, and the mass generation of that was possible because of this technology, so that the letter composition for printing could be made possible. This is a more closer look. So, this is the matrix type, and the letter you see over here is the Bengali letter called the K, which is also there in Hindi, and it comes with a sort of acute dash on top, which is a very elemental matra used in the Bengali script. This again is the reverse of G in Bengali, and that is basically all the punches, like few of the punches. You can see the tip with the letter and the reverse, like you can see the alphabet in reverse on the tip of that metal, which is almost half the size of a finger. And that what you see on top right is essentially a hand mold which is kept vertically, and when you sort of clasp it together, it creates this hollow space in which the molten lava would go, and then once it would dry up, what would you get as a result was the movable type. Now moving on, so when this task was sort of given by the governor, the British administration, the book that they really wanted to create, like I mentioned, was essentially a grammar book which could be translated from Bangla to English. And the book that you see, this is the first page of that book, which is called A Grammar of the Bengal Language. The original copy of this lies, like every other artifacts, in the British Museum. But there are few copies which you will find in a few Asiatic societies here and there. Charles Wilkins also was one of the founders of Asiatic Society, so by virtue of it, it also happens to be there. But if any of you happen to visit London, then you will probably see a copy of this in London as well as in New York. So this was the first book that was printed in an Indian language for the first time in India through an organized process. And I will show you more glimpses of what the book essentially had, which was a Bengali word in Bangla, then in Sanskrit, and then the translation of that word in English.
Does the type of this survive? The type used for printing this?
No, not really. Of course, I mean, Panchanan Karmakar gave a very what should I say, a basic attempt, and then of course it was refined over the years by him, then by his son-in-law Manohar Karmakar, his nephew Adhar Chandra Karmakar. So Bangla of course saw a lot of progress in terms of the sharpness of the font, if I may say, but Bangla again, if you look back at it, it doesn't really have a lot of fonts. It doesn't have a lot of, but this is not retained. Now we have a more modern font, which is what has been used. I will take you through in the later slide. Borno Porichoy, which was by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, he actually visited our house and he used to do a lot of a study of Panchanon's work, and then he created something on a modern Bengali script, which was later used for generations, and now we have more like digitized elements to it, which is used for printing. So this is basically like a rough page from the grammar of the Bengal language. What you see over here is Bengali, Sanskrit, and the translation of that word in English. Okay. So what you see over here is basically is Panchanan Karmakar's work, which is why the sharpness is not as you see in today's Bengali print now. So, you know, a lot of people sort of reduce Panchanan Karmakar's contributions to the Bangla script, but subsequently once Bangla had that sort of crispness and it was much more refined, he then graduated towards spending most of his time in developing the Devanagari script, which in Pooja's talk she mentioned that a lot of it was used in North India. So that was essentially Panchanan Karmakar and his predecessor's work.
So the orthography is very interesting because they call Bengali as Bengalis.
Yes.
Normally these books are translated by mostly Europeans.
Yeah.
Germans or British. What was the intention? Like, what was the intention? Were there only 2 copies or many copies printed?
No, there were several copies. So, like I mentioned, the British administration, the East India Company, the top honchos wanted to learn Bengali for better administration, which is why, and because then it was the British capital, Kolkata, which is why Bengali was spoken by most of the important and influential people who could, help them with trade and other activities. So, which is why they thought that it's imperative for them to learn Bangla. So, this is essentially a translation book for the British rulers who were then trying to establish themselves in India. Mind you, Srirampur and that whole belt of Hooghly has a very rich colonial past. Like Srirampur again is a small town, the collective radius will be probably, I don't know, like 10-15 kilometers. And it was ruled by the Danish before the British, and it overlapped when India, in Srirampur. So only the specific part.
Where is Srirampur?
Shridampur is about 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers from Howrah. So it's towards the suburban side, about 1.5 hours by road if you try to take from central Kolkata and take a ride. So Shridampur was ruled by the Danes, and this was like sort of that weird period when British was trying to get a foothold, but the Danish still existed. Then there were parts which had French, which had Portuguese, so that whole, and they are small towns, okay, they are not like patches or like they're not like big colonizations. Even Chandanagar, which is not very far from Shridampur, that was ruled by French throughout. The British never, funnily, never made it through that little small space that they owned, and the French town was independent even after the whole country was independent. So we got independence in 1947, and Chandanagar I think was 1951. So the French.
When was this book printed?
This was printed in 1778. Yeah.
Mostly missionaries will do it.
So this was not done by the missionaries. This was under the the East India Company rule. The missionaries started to come around the late 19th century. So around 1800 is when William Carey, William Ward, Joshua Marshman sort of stepped foot in Shridampur, and then Panchanan Karmakar started working with them. So the last 4 years of his life he worked for the Shridampur, or what is known as the Baptist Mission Press.
So here the Sanskrit is not given in Devanagari font. That's because the Devanagari font didn't exist.
No, so first was Bangla, then it was followed by Devanagari. So the first few years of his life, Panchanan Karmakar spent time with Charles Wilkins to only refine the Bangla font. Once his work was done with Bangla is when he started graduating and started focusing on Devanagari. But he did spend a lot of time on the Devanagari front as well. And even so, like she mentioned, North India had a lot of these Devanagari. If you now look at it, there's a lot of variation in Marathi and other Devanagari fonts. Like she said, Marathi also was specifically looked into, but Panchanan Karmakar also died at a very early age of 54 years. So I mean, he had just started work, and then a lot of the work was sort of carried forward by his disciple turned son-in-law Manohar Karmakar. So he only had one daughter, and he specifically sort of scouted someone who could keep his legacy. And archiving is not something Indians were great at. So I think it's a good move on his part. So coming back to the Baptist Mission Press, this was in 1778, a grammar of the Bengal language, and then subsequently Charles Wilkins also made the translation of the Bhagavad Gita from Bangla to English as well, and the Bible was also, so all of these religious scripts were often translated through these fonts, and at that point in time literature, mind you, was very sort of religious and constrained to that. But luckily, thanks to journalism and thanks to this whole spread of education, and West Bengal was sort of going through a renaissance period. So post Panchanan saw this era where print was not only restricted to translations of religious texts and news, but also a lot of educative initiatives. So what you see right here is basically the Baptist Mission Press, which used to be in Shridampur. And Shridampur, which again the space where the place where where my past 5 generations have lived in is called Bortola now, but it used to be earlier called Kamarpara, which is derived from the word Karmakar. So it was called Kamarpara because the first Asia's first organized foundry was from that house through Panchanon's efforts. So once that foundry was set, then the Baptist missionaries sort of paved way. Again, just to give you some context, colonization was at its peak at this point in time, and the missionaries really wanted to spread Christianity. That was their, primary objective, but they also helped a lot with education. Shridampur College, which is still there, is the first Asian college which taught theology, which again is a religious initiative. So this was essentially done by the Baptist missionaries, which is William Carey, William Ward, and Joshua Marshman, the 3 men who were sort of popularly known as the Shridampur trio. But they actually assisted a lot in terms of printing, and for a very short period of time, Shridampur was one of the most active hubs of type making in Asia. So Shomachar Darpan is many years after Panchanan Karmakar passed away. Panchanan Karmakar, like I mentioned, passed away at an early age of 54 when it was 1804, and then Shomachar Darpan was printed using his refined fonts in 1818. This is the first regional newspaper that was printed with the help from the Baptist missionaries. Again, the Baptist Mission Press was sort of, it caught fire in one of the years. Again, a lot of things were lost in that fire, which is why you will probably not see a lot of archival material from that period, unfortunately. If you go to Srirampur College, there's still some remnants of the Baptist missionary, some recordings of events here and there that you will find if you are interested in that piece of history. Now, Panchanan Karmakar, of course, you know, he's often reduced to being just a fontsmith, but he was exceptionally an artist. He was also visionary, and I think when I started going through my great grandfather's work, I started sort of rediscovering who he was as a person, because what understanding I had was a very bookish understanding, something that I heard from my father or my you know, my father's other brothers. It was very handed down information, but I think like most artists, he was very shy and he didn't want to sort of make a gung-ho deal about the fact what he was doing, but he did have that vision to understand that it's a very unique ability that he has, was to carve these types. It was an unique skill, so he sort of started gathering a bunch of students and passing on the skills that it requires to sort of take this tradition forward and make Srirampur, make India a more independent place for printing and not be entirely reliant on foreign resources. What you see to your left is basically in Bengali, it's written Adhar Type Foundry, which was Panchanan Karmakar's nephew. Again, he was, you know, even if you now go to like a few publications, especially even Ananda Bazar Patrika, which is a very predominantly Bengali newspaper, if you look at their movable types, it's often written ATP, which is Other Type Foundry. So that type foundry also sort of you know, supplied fonts to a lot of publications for a long time. It's just that Srirampur, again, because there was so much knowledge about the skill, there were a lot of independent typographers and printers as well, which for a long period wasn't very organized, but it was all sort of supplies to British, supplies to few socio-political movements as well. So what you see over here is basically all the Bengali alphabets and characters on that image. And against each character is basically a formula which is given, which was followed to sort of make those fonts. And this was actually revised by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, which again was used for other Bengali books during that whole Bengal Renaissance period. Any questions so far, or can I?
If you are using the Gutenberg technology, so they were using only ABCD alphabets. That's I mean, Roman alphabets. But here, for Bengali, you have a different visual alphabets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who created that?
That was Panchanan Karmakar, who was my great grandfather about whom I've been talking.
But he created only the first. He invented the machine, Gutenberg.
He did, yeah. Gutenberg invented the machine in
from Germany.
15th century, yeah.
Oh.
So I don't know if you missed this part. This is basically the Gutenberg technology, the hand mold that you see, the matrix, the punch. If you are interested, I'll probably take you through after the session. And this is what is Panchanon's work essentially. So these are all the Bengali alphabets on the metal type.
And most of the earliest dictionaries, I mean, constructed by the Europeans are very bookish.
Yeah.
Very bookish. Even the Tamil one,
right.
The dictionary which they did here in Tamil Nadu, Tarangambadi. So there is a German, I forgot his name. He's not anymore. No, he was born here in Tarangambadi.
Right.
So I saw the Tamil in English, very bookish.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they just wanted to learn the language and get it done with. They were not really interested in our literature per se. So it was a very mechanical job for them to only understand the language to rule better.
The early foundries, were they copper brass based or were they steel based?
So the punch was made out of steel, which is the mother type, and then the matrix that you see, which is the second element of the whole type making process, that was a softer metal, mostly copper. And then the movable types that were released through that hand mold were often mixed metals. So never glass, but like it had to be metal to ensure that the design of the font sort of retains on it. So
lead and antimony.
Lead, antimony, yeah.
Was it lead or steel?
There was no lead?
Lead was only a mix of the movable type. In the primary one, the mother type, this what you see is essentially steel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much?
250.
This was steel, this was copper, and it's very difficult to photograph the movable typefaces, but if you come for the exhibition tomorrow, I do have a sample so you can have a look at that. It's not as rigid as the first two. It's much softer metal, which is why it's mixed. And the color also is very grayish, whereas these are more towards the brownish blackish tinge.
1,000 copies were printed. How many copies were printed?
Of the book, I'm not sure about the volume, but they were manufactured in many rounds. So I don't know exactly how many were printed. Yeah, so I just want to take you through the post Panchanon era as well. So this Panchanon Karmakar, for everyone who missed, he passed away at an early age of 54 and in the year 1804. And after that, of course, his legacy sort of continued through his son-in-law, through his brother, and through his nephew Adhar Chandra Karmakar, like I mentioned. So what you see over here are typesetting machines, which is more of an advanced way of making types. So they were imported from Britain. You see over there the Mason Makers London, which was the machine, which was the company that sort of delivered these to us. I have tried, to find a website or to locate them, but I think they no longer continue in the business as. I mean, neither does our family, but I couldn't get hold of any contact or anything. But basically, at that point in time, they were one of the key suppliers of typesetting machines in Britain and other colonial countries which sort of Britain was occupying. These machines is basically how it looked. 12 of these machines were sent to Sri Rampur, which were used in the other type foundry and other type foundries as well, to sort of churn movable typefaces much faster. What you saw earlier, that whole hand mold machine was a much more painstaking and time-taking job, and the need for printing was sort of more aggressive at this point in time, the early 19th century, which is why they realized that they need to sort of escalate production, which is why these machines were sort of sent to us, and they continued to be with us for a long time. My family has only managed to retain 4 of these machines, which if you happen to visit Sri Rampur, please let us know, then we would be happy to show you. These are again sort of safely kept in our in my ancestral home, and they were recently exhibited, and this is basically how they used to look.
What exactly do these machines do?
So how you saw that using those hand mold machines, we used to make movable types. That was a very long process, and one-on-one, this used to sort of be like escalate the production of those movable types. So this is just an advanced way of making types, basically movable types.
Part of it, like making the punch?
No. Punch and the matrix, I don't think the matrix was used in this. The punch was made as is. I mean, I have some tools that I've managed to get, which the airport authorities would allow because they were very sharp. So they sort of used to like aggressively carve out on that metal piece. So then that was introduced somewhere in the system over here. I am not an expert, but I'm sure someone who learns typography can tell you that. And also a lot of the parts are not as assembled as it used to be probably 200 years ago. Few of them have decayed, but this is basically the release tray where the movable types would sort of come out of. And what you see, there's like sort of a pulley system that they used to use. This is as is, but yeah, basically to churn out more movable types at a time than do it as time. I mean, it was far less time consuming.
Did this would move on to etching at some point in time?
Sorry?
Etching? From hand carving to etching?
I'm not familiar with that term. Can you dumb it down for me?
It's chemically removing parts of the metal that you don't want.
Possibly so. Again, I'm not an expert in this field. I have just, it's more of an archival effort at my end. So these technical questions, maybe if you are really keen, I do have someone who assists me in understanding the technicalities of this. I can check with him and let you know.
My sense is that etching in Indic scripts happened prior to movable type, and it was largely used for maps.
No, it was used for type as well prior to photography, right? Because photography
Right.
and this combined at some point in time.
Yeah, but in India, I think
But
it's
you can't put a finger on the history of it in
Right.
India, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah, I mean, mostly, a lot of it was used for maps before, especially before lithography came in as well.
Okay.
This machine is Gutenberg machine or based on that updated. And what was the urgency to bring this machine into market? Was there a lot of literature becoming famous, or the Bible?
Yeah, so more literature not just consumed to religious scripts, but also journalism was really taking steam in India. What you saw in the earlier slide, Samachar Darpan, which was the first newspaper that was ever published in India in 1818. So again, Bengal, because it was going through that whole Renaissance period, there were several pockets which wanted to come up with a newspaper to sort of pass on news to a wider section of society. Especially, first it started by the British, then of course learning from them, even we made it like a political tool of some sense, where basically the need for printing sort of yeah, increased a lot in Bengal, and then of course across India as well. And at this point in time, what you see right now, the early 19th century, Srirampur and Bengal sort of became one of the hottest hub for type making in not just India but in Asia. It was a very brief period. Even Tranquebar down south held a lot of history in sense of type making. But again, I think their version and our versions were sort of different.
And does the family also have a history or a tradition in seal making besides type
No.
making?
No, it was strictly type making. So we continued for about 3 generations. My father even saw the type foundry. I was very young when I saw the type foundry get demolished, unfortunately. And like Pooja feels about not coming across any of those old fonts, even my heart ached. But you know, especially smaller towns like Srirampur doesn't get any sort of artistic or heritage conservation kind of attention from any individual or authority in that sense. So I mean, it was a need for the hour. So
Why are you not using the photographs of Karmakar brothers?
because I don't have one, unfortunately. Like I said, that I think they were very artistic but quite bad at archiving. So a lot of remnants were destroyed during the fire incident. Then what you see right now has been passed down across 5 generations. So each generation saw a little bit of decay, damage, theft often. There is a portrait we have. We don't have a photograph of Mr. Karmakar. A portrait we have somewhere in the world that I haven't been fortunate enough to find yet. If I do, I will definitely make sure all of you reach.
Your father, right?
Who?
The Karmakar brothers? No.
No, my great grandfather's. This is 200 years ago. Yeah. So, taking you through where I stand in the family tree. This is the house of Harafs. This is the house that we have still sort of kept. I've fought many wars to make sure that this is still there. So if you ever manage to come to Srirampur, you will still come across this house. I don't know the ones who were before this, but it sort of started from Panchanan Karmakar and Gadadhar Karmakar. They were 2 brothers who were discovered. Then Panchanan Karmakar, he only had a daughter, Lakshmi Mani, who was married to Manohar Karmakar, again one of his very meticulous and notable disciples.
Something very interesting. Gutenberg also, his daughter, who was also married to one of his apprentices.
Yeah.
He drove Gutenberg out of business.
So many names from Mahabharata.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Gadadhar, Bhim.
exactly. No, I don't have a Bhim luckily in the family, so I think I'm fine. So yeah, in fact, funny you say that because even Manohar Karmakar, he's sort of like how the young people say right now, Panchanan worked so that he could run. So it was kind of like that, where he sort of Panchanan started with a few languages, and then Manohar sort of upscaled it and made typefaces in 40 plus languages, including Japanese, Chinese, Burmese, Arabic, and other Indian languages. So you know, for no, they also used to sort of export. In fact, we did have a few Chinese and Japanese scholar who visited Sri Rampur to understand how it all started, because apparently this also changed their print game, which I'm not familiar with, but a lot of scholars still visit to sort of understand how it impacted their indigenous printing process. So I come from the line of Gadadhar Karmakar, because I mean at that point in time, like it sort of, if you didn't have a son, your brother sort of carried on the lineage. Then it was Adhar Chandra Karmakar, my grandfather Ramchandra Karmakar, my father, and then there's me. So that's primarily, and I mean it's not just one brother. At that point in time, people used to have multiple brothers, but it's just that my father, out of the whole family, sort of realized that this is a part of lost history that we must sort of preserve, and it is because of his efforts that whatever I will be able to show you today, we have those, because a lot of things actually got stolen, and then they were sort of sold as scraps in the market. But yeah, across these 5 generations, we have managed to retain some parts of Asia's largest type foundry.
Also, some Sanskrit plays were printed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sanskrit, Bengali Sanskrit was printed.
No,
Right.
I mean the Sanskrit plays.
Plays as in the place.
Kalidasa's plays,
But you know what?
Mana's plays.
Right.
Because the 3 languages, Bengali, Sanskrit,
Yeah.
and
I'm sure they must have been printed from one of the presses. Again, my family was not involved directly with printing. We were only type makers. So we would only produce the types in certain languages and supply it to multiple printers who required our services. So we never really directly engaged with printing. So basically what we are in the midst of right now, what I'm trying to do is sort of archive whatever has been left behind. What you see over here is what in Bengali we call puthi, in English we call manuscripts. These are older than Panchanan Karmakar, so he was also involved in writing on puthis, because at that point in time all these sort of merged into one occupation. This what you see over here are palm leaves, which are almost 300 years old, and this over here is handmade paper on which you see these texts. Again, very different kind of Bengali which we no longer speak anymore, and they were again painstakingly handwritten, and most of the content, if you see, is very religious. Over here, if you see, these are basically devotional songs, and I don't know if there's any music practitioner here, but these apparently are notes that they used to follow, but these are more in the realm of bhajans and kirtans, a lot of depiction from Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc. Also, the translation of Ramayana and Mahabharata was possible because of the Karmakar brothers who worked with the administration at that point in time to make it possible. This is the actual photograph of a grammar of the Bengal language. Again, this is a copy that my family was gifted with. We didn't make it to the originals list. That is basically how a recent exhibition was the first public display of all the remnants that we had from the type foundry. What you see over there, the last picture to your right, is basically the typefaces in Devanagari and Bangla. I used the best kind of cameras, but even the photographers, to their efforts, they failed at capturing because they're so microscopic. So when people see it, normally there's a microscope attached to it so that they can glide it over, and then it's easier for them to understand.
But these are fabric. This looks like a fabric.
Yeah, so because it's very difficult to not be able to see them vertically. So we sort of made like a jewelry box concept where we sort of dug them in so that you could see them vertically.
But you'll be able to read them once you put ink at it.
No, you would be able to read them laterally inverted if you just had a loop or a magnifying glass.
Yeah. So when we exhibit it in an organized manner, normally there's a magnifying glass which is attached on top.
Is that the picture?
Yeah, so the lady whom you see, she's gliding that microscopic, that magnifying glass, and if she leans in a little closer, she'll be able to, if she knows Bangla or Hindi, she'll be able to make what alphabet it is. So this is basically the copy of the book that we have still managed to keep. Those are the actual Harafs. So we have around 300 Harafs that we still have managed to keep. This over here is basically again, because Srirampur, although it's a small town, it's sort of going through a rampant urbanization at this point in time. So a lot of these old buildings which were a part of this whole print movement and the whole cultural and literature movement of Bengal at one point in time, and Kolkata of course is much younger compared to like a Srirampur and other towns. So before we lose all evidence that these places actually existed, we did like an archival effort of photographing Srirampur through 200 pictures, and those pictures were also displayed as an extension of the exhibition, because again Srirampur itself sort of holds that history together. So to tie everything together, the Baptist Missionary Press, the Srirampur College, Panchanan Karmakar, the missionaries, all of them have been sort of documented through photographs. Now basically what the future entails. So now if you look at them closely, I think you'll be able to make out how the tops of those punches looked. And this here is a Gen 2 type. It's not by Panchanan Karmakar, but it's just used for how other types were actually there at that point in time. So now that we have all of these things, very few people even in Bengal manage to know of this history. They often, even when the Britishers sort of documented these kind of invention, it was always mentioned Charles Wilkins and another blacksmith, or the missionaries and another blacksmith. The due recognition that the Indians deserved at that point in time were sort of never documented that way. So what a lot of, actually not a lot, a few families like us, we are trying to sort of stitch those stories and bring them back and revive. So now this is the second public discussion talk that I am hosting as a part of the archival effort to sort of keep these stories alive, to keep this contribution alive, because like I mentioned, it's not just only restricted to Bangla. Panchanan also contributed generously to Devanagari and other scripts, and then Monohar to other 40 plus languages. So the wish is to have a permanent museum in Srirampur, because that is where it truly belongs, and but also at the same time to take it to different corners of the country. And also there's a lot of print technology and typography colleges in different parts of the world, which I'd be more than happy to collaborate with to keep this part of history alive. And of course, I don't think Panchanan Karmakar ever got his due recognition. If in a room of 100 Bengalis I shout out his name, probably only 1 or 2 person will know. So the effort is to sort of make it more of a common knowledge before it completely dies down. And that brings us to sort of the end of this presentation, which is basically a mix of what the history was and what the future of that history looks like. So yeah, now if you have any recommendations, if you know of anyone who could be interested, if you have any suggestion, that's my official ID. You can always reach out to me even after this talk. And if you have any questions, thoughts, prayers, I'm all open.
Is the government supporting or any university, or I mean like in India, they are supporting or funding?
No, not at all. In fact, I mean, we do get a little bit of little suggestions here and there. Oh, let's open a museum. Why don't you give all your relics to us and we will take care of the upkeep. But I've been to museums that are run by them and I don't feel confident.
I mean, this is a precious one, right? I mean, like.
Yeah, so actually, unfortunately, I mean, without criticizing the government, but they often talk about how culture is so elemental to our existence, but there's not a single mention of art and culture funds in our budget year after year. So there's no organized way of getting these funds. More so, there are other governments like the Danish government. If you go to Shrirampur right now, they're spending in crores to restore the Danish institutions from about 200, 250 years ago. But now there's a refurbishment of the hotel that they used to stay at. There's a refurbishment of the church, the cemetery, and there's a museum which they have kept. It's a photographic museum where they have their whole history sort of laid out in the walls for common people to sort of know, and it's also part of the Indo-Danish friendship at a more national scale. But those foreign institutions and governments have more grants, but again, to get hold of those grants is another task. And not again, Bengal, if you have been reading the news, is not doing well economically. So I don't.
I mean, like passports were introduced on 18th century, 19th century with printed papers. Only the photo and the names were written in ink.
Yeah.
Like these printers were used, or I mean, like what kind of printers? Same thing.
I'm not sure the passport making process was, because again most of the passports were in English. So I think that was already a part of the system which did history didn't have much to contribute. Yeah.
No, the Britishers used the passport.
So we have time for a couple of questions.
In one of the slides, you showed some manuscripts.
Right.
Were they part of the family tradition?
Yeah, so again these manuscripts are around 300, 320 years old. These are even before Panchanan Karmaka's time. Again, we have about.
My follow-up question.
Yeah.
So was the family a part of scribal tradition before they became a type-making family?
Yeah. Like I started the presentation with. This is how they started. They used to work in the darbar of Alivardi Khan. So they used to primarily work on swords, which were metal.
Prior to metalworking,
Yeah,
did
they
belong to a scribal
yes.
tradition?
They did. They basically in font, anything to do with sculpting, anything to do with font is essentially what they mastered
Do you
in.
have any styluses preserved as part of your collection?
No, even if you look at these manuscripts, there are different handwritings. So obviously, it was not just done by one person in the family. There were most of the men were in this occupation, like I mentioned. So each of them had their own transcriptions.
Have their names mentioned usually at the end of the
No, not at all. Like I said, even we don't even have anything that mentions Panchanan Karmakar. Yeah, even in the manuscripts, none of this have any of their signature per se or any mention of their contributions, nothing. But yeah, even I have only managed to get one of the manuscripts because they're very fragile and I don't want to cause more damage. But yeah, we have about 160 of these manuscripts from like 300, 320 years ago. So we have around 9 palm leaves and around 140 handmade paper manuscripts.
That is the number of folios you're talking.
No, the folios, I think 9 manuscripts make 1 folio, if I'm not wrong.
It varies.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say folio, each piece I'm saying with writings on both sides. Yeah.
Manuscripts are made with any particular trees?
Mostly palm. Yeah. Palm or even what's the tree, the paper, like basically handmade paper. I'm not sure which tree it was, but yeah, I can find out.
Birch bark?
Could be. Again,
All manuscripts are intact.
yeah, so right now we are in the middle of a preservation process, so we have kept them separately. But yeah.
So, but you can correlate this
Yeah.
at the page.
Yeah, we can do that. So again, some excerpts of Ramayana on most of these very religious texts.
Manuscripts.
There are.
Any illustrated manuscripts?
No, unfortunately, no. In fact, because font again is very limited in Indian language, we don't have too many fonts. So I think this is probably a little bit in line with Pooja's work, where Satyajit Ray also, the maverick filmmaker, when he was making his film posters, he wanted to experiment with fonts. So he also came to Srirampur to our house to study Panchanan Karmakar and Ishwar Chandra's work, so that he could replicate some of the technicalities in his poster fonts. So I think very few work on illustration, but a handful of people used to come and take inspiration on those kind of works. Yeah.
The name palm script comes from the wood that is used, or people use palms to write.
No, I think the
Yes,
material.
I mean,
it's
it's
the
written like this in the olden age and all. The name comes from this palm or wood.
no, I think it's the tree. If I'm not wrong. Yeah.
It's the tree. It's the tree.
Yeah.
Even I think in pot, the painting style,
Yeah.
even that is done. Potachitra,
Yeah.
it's done on palm leaves. A lot of it.
Yeah. So actually, interestingly, the only one that I managed to get here, because it's the smallest, it's Pottochitra on the palm. It's just someone who decided to doodle one day on a palm leaf, and that's just there. Yeah.
All right. So
Okay.
thank you again.
Thank you.